right, welcome into the Bucks on the Pond podcast. Our Conway Regional Recap podcast is here. I'm Stephen Igo. I'm joined by Jonathan Wagner and Scott Lorbatcher. Pirates with a pretty memorable weekend in many ways, but come up short, losing 1-0 to Coastal Carolina in the regional final on Sunday night. They conclude their season as the runner-ups. The Conway Regional. Coastal Carolina advances to the Super Regional to take on the Chanticleers. That doesn't make any sense. To take on the Auburn Tigers. I just wanted to say Chanticleers as much as possible. But guys, man, there's a lot to unpack with this regional, with this team, the season. I'll say this up front. Our plan is to do more of a regional recap tonight, which we got plenty to get from that. And then more, once this portal thing plays out, we will have a better idea of how the offseason looks. So we'll follow up. Are y'all both good for next Monday night?
Yep.
Okay, so I think by then we'll have an idea of what's happening on that front. And I'm sure we'll get questions throughout the show. So we'll get into that when we can. But it'll be more of a look ahead to next year, next Monday. All right. Overall thoughts, we always start with that. So we'll do that to begin today's show. We'll start with Jonathan. Your thoughts on the Conway Regional?
Yeah, I think it was a continuation of the conference tournament, but really it was even better. And, ECU showed up in every facet of the game. They played good defense throughout the weekend for the most part. They pitched exceptionally well. You had guys step up. And the big question coming into the weekend was, does ECU have the pitching to survive in a regional? Because I think to me, it's easier to make it through a conference tournament setup when you have days off mixed in. And there's no days off on regionals. So it makes it tougher on pitching staffs, especially once you get to Sunday and have to play two if you're coming out of a loser's bracket like ECU was. But guys stepped up. Lance Williams stepped up and had probably the best game of his career. Bradley Zayak definitely had the best game of his career. And guys like Austin Irby, Alex Peltier, Jack Herring, all those guys that probably aren't the first on the list when you look at guys who need to step up and be a top guy for East Carolina, they all did at the same time and had a great weekend. So it was tough to lose. But at the same time, I came out of it feeling pretty good. And, we talked about it last week, but during the conference tournament, we were all burnt out. Everyone's burnt out. And there was part of me that's like, man, if they just go 0-2 and we just get this season over with, then I don't have to be frustrated next week. But then now it turned into, at the end of this regional, I sat there for probably 30 minutes just on the couch staring at the TV after the broadcast turned off because I didn't want it to be over. And, guys like Riley Johnson, Jay Connor, they also poured everything they had into this weekend. So great performance. And the weekend really changed my tune on how I feel about this team going into next year. But like I said, it doesn't, at the same time, it doesn't mask the issues that happened. But overall, positive weekend, I think, even though you didn't win, but really just about as good as you could hope for from a development standpoint, I think.
I want to add before we get to Scott, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, and X. If you got a question, comment, concern, drop it in the chat. And we do have our super chats activated on YouTube. So show your support for Hoist the Colors on YouTube. You can go there, hit the $, and any amount is extremely grateful. We've been rolling with that lately. All right, Scott, your thoughts on the regional?
Yeah, I would say that, from 2 weeks ago to today, I think there's a lot less holes to fill in this roster going into next year. You look at a guy like Irby, who, ever since he got in that little dust up at first base at South Florida, has been on a tear. On the mound, guys like Zayak and Lance Williams really just showed their ability. That potential has turned into ability for a lot of this team. And even a guy like Alex Peltier, whose numbers may not still jump off the page, I think you saw his defensive ability show out over the regional. And, he's probably your everyday center fielder going into next year. And one thing with him is he looked like a different hitter with guys on base than he has this entire season. And I think the change to the lineup has really provided provided a spark that I really wish we would have had, maybe halfway through conference play, because I think this team could have. I think the ceiling was much higher than we realized through the regular season if things would have clicked a little bit earlier on.
Yeah, fair thoughts for sure. I will. I said this earlier on the radio show, but I'll just echo it again. It was just a fun weekend. I know you guys watched it on TV, and a lot of people in the chat did. But if you were there, like the atmosphere was great. Coastal did a phenomenal job. Despite what Kevin O'Sullivan said, the NCAA site reps did a phenomenal job. We'll get into that whole ordeal as well. But first class operation for Coastal Carolina hosting the regional. I thought there were some things ECU could even learn from how they ran it. The music was great. Concessions were great. Just a lot of – it felt like a big-time atmosphere. And Coastal was a big-time baseball team. Look, they were the best team in the regional. They definitely benefited from not playing Florida twice. Like ECU kind of did the dirty work by knocking Florida out for them, and that played to their benefit. But you got to give Coastal credit, man. They answered ECU. Like the first 6 innings of Saturday game were incredible. They kept answering ECU. ECU would answer. It was back and forth. It was punch, counter punch, counter punch, and then Coastal landed the knockout blow. And then, you get to Sunday, we're all thinking it's going to be 12-9, 12-8, whatever, and Coastal wins 1-0. So just kind of shows you how crazy the sport of baseball can be. And Bradley Zach, hell of a performance. But, as you look at the individual games, gentlemen, what, is there a moment or a performance individually or a game you'll remember most from this regional? What from that aspect of things will you remember most? We'll start with Wags.
Yeah, I'm going to look at and I'm going through the scorebook just to make sure I get the game right. But I'm looking at Jake Hunter, and it was the game against Florida on yesterday. And, you all the days are going together.
Yesterday, it was a lot of baseball in a short amount of time.
But, yeah, you jump out big offensively, and you get a really good start from Lance Williams. And then you go to one of your top guys in Brad Pruitt, and again, he just didn't show up. And that was the negative of the weekend was Brad Pruitt. But instead of, he wasn't able to get it out. But instead of kind of letting that just spiral into something else, and the next guy who comes in a bad situation can't get it done, Jake Hunter came in and shut it down. And he gave you 4 innings from there. And if Jake Hunter doesn't give you 4 innings right there, then, obviously I don't think you win that game. But you're looking ahead at that point. And it's like if Jake Hunter doesn't, then who else are you going to have to bring in? And then it's who else is going to be available for the game on Sunday night against Coastal? And then if you win that game, who's going to be available for that one? And it was already thin. So if Jake Hunter didn't step up and do it what he did when he did, then it's a much different feeling weekend for sure. And, it's great that he was able to have that moment because I didn't expect him to pitch this year at all. And the fact that he's not only pitched this year, but pitched as much as he did as one of the key guys, and he's had his ups and downs, but in the end, he ended his personal career on a high note. He shut down a team that I didn't think we were going to beat, let alone beat twice. And again, Jake Hunter stepped up and he ended his career on a high note. So I was really happy for him because, I think Riley Johnson, rightfully so, gets a lot of the attention as this kind of class of outgoing guys. But Jake Hunter, he deserves to sing his praises as well. And Jake Hunter deserves to go out how he did individually for sure.
Tell you what, he was letting it rip in that final game against Florida, holding nothing back. And it was you could tell he thought it maybe was his last time pitching in college. Scott, what about you?
Yeah, individual performance, I'd put Ethan Norby's up there with anybody. Pitching against an SEC team and not having, plus fastball stuff, but just making guys miss and 10 strikeouts, 7 innings. And we've seen it a lot this year where we've jumped out to a lead and then our pitching kind of lets us down, lets teams back into it. He just never let them back into the game. And that was just an awesome performance out of him. And he's a true Friday night guy now. I know going into the year, we had a lot of questions about whether he would even pitch out of the pen or as a starter. And he solidified himself, in my opinion, as one of the the best starting pitchers in the American and maybe even the whole country. And then, but individual game, I would say that Saturday night game against Coastal, you could feel the electricity through the TV. Really, I mean, it was just an awesome game. Obviously, you want to come out on top of those, but um, you know, I think it's important to give Coastal their credit because they are a fantastic program. Going into the regional, I said there's no way they're a 13 seed. They shouldn't have been a 13 seed. They should have been a top 8. I think they've proven that over and over again. But yeah, that just an awesome atmosphere. You could see how much it means to the fans, how loud it was coming through the TV, and you could hear the East Carolina fans when things were going well for us too, and that's really really cool. And I do hope these two programs can get together and play a lot more often going forward. Now that the coaches get along, I guess.
We think
Maybe
they get along better than the guys wearing orange and blue. All right. Before we get to the questions and comments, keep those rolling, and we'll get to those in a little bit. It's always easy to second guess, but were there any decisions or moments that you guys feel, or maybe not even decisions, but just plays that didn't go ECU's way that could have changed the course of the regional for East Carolina in terms of winning it or losing it, if you want to look at it earlier that way? Any thoughts? We'll start with Wags.
Yeah, I think you teed this one up for me because you knew I was going to bring it up at some point. But and I will say I'm not as heated as at this decision as I was in real time. But I hated the management of the pitching staff against Coastal Carolina in the first time we played them, and I think and it started with Sean Jenkins didn't give you enough, and you needed more length out of him, and it starts there, and that's when he can't get out of the third inning, that throws everything kind of out. But Ethan Young came in next, and he was okay, and he got you out of some big spots, and he also put you in some bad spots. But to me, when he got through that, I think it was 6th inning, and once he got through that 6th inning, to me it looked pretty clear that should have been the end of his day. And he was gassed. You could tell he was a little frustrated up there. And to me, when he got out of that jam, only allowing a run, I think that should have been the end of his day. And, and I said, you guys can vouch for me. I said that before he came out for the top of the 7th and gave up a solo homer. And then to me, it was, Brad Pruitt came in next. And I feel a little bit differently about this than I did at the time, just knowing how Pruitt performed over the weekend, and it was not good. But I also think, to me, when I was watching, and I was texting with some people too, it looked from right out of the gates that Brad Pruitt did not have it. And his pitches didn't look very competitive. And I know that the Burris error was tough. And then you had kind of a tough luck single the next at bat. And if those two plays go differently and you get a bounce, then it's a completely different inning and probably a completely different game. But again, I still think, to me, in my eyes, I didn't think Pruitt looked very good and he wasn't very sharp. And I understand the side of it where it's, who's next? And yes, those are your guys. But to me, it's also, in my eyes, just how I look at these types of things. Even if you're one of my guys and I don't have anybody I trust after you, if you go out there and you look like you very clearly don't have it, I'm not going to just let you stay out there and hope you figure it out when to me, I didn't think he was going to. So that was the one big thing that stood out to me. But again, knowing how Brad Pruitt kind of fared over the rest of the regional, I don't feel as heated about that, and just how the pitching staff was set up to begin with. But that was a one major gripe I had, and I know I was blowing you guys up that night too because I really hated it. But again, I also understand why they made the decision to kind of let Pruitt ride it out for maybe a couple more batters than I thought they should have.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one of those things. Fair, I mean, definitely very fair. And Pruitt, we said going in, you needed good Ethan Young and good Brad Pruitt to have a chance to win the regional. And I would say Ethan Young was good for sure. I mean, they asked a lot out of him. Was he great? No, but how much of that was fatigue? Probably a lot. And, Jenkins, it was teetering early. He was throwing strikes, but he was almost in the zone too much. I mean, I think it was 20 6 or maybe even like 28 of 34 pitches were strikes or something like that, something crazy. And it was like Coastal was just kind of not, they didn't have to chase because everything was in the zone. So it was tedious, and I didn't hate going to Young early, but after Young and when he was clearly gassed, I get it. As Skull says, why was Jenkins even the starter in the 1-0 game? That seemed wrong from the start. Look, Jenkins had just pitched you to a championship the prior Sunday. You had no other second starter, so I have no problem with that. Scott, your thoughts here or any other decisions?
Yeah, I would say as far as the Jenkins starting, your other options probably Moran, who also didn't have a great weekend, and maybe Zayak, who was your last starter. And I don't know that you were ever going to expect to get what you got out of him on the final game, but I would just say it's not really a decision, but it is something that has really hurt us this year, and it's our defense up the middle, especially in that second game. When we were going through those innings where Coastal was, really going back and forth with us, we gave them a lot of extra outs. With made 3 errors, one by Dixon, one by Burris up the middle. That led to runs that maybe don't score if you make those plays. So I just think we still need to get better defensively up the middle. We still need to find a shortstop with a glove that can provide some offense. Dixon obviously provided some offense this weekend, but he's not a shortstop. And we played him out of position. He did well playing out of position for the most part, but just middle infield defense is crucial at this level to prevent easy runs from scoring and getting out of it.
All right, JPN says Dixon needed to bunt after the Herring double on Sunday night. So I was fine with letting him swing there. I mean, this is like classic hindsight 2020 for sure. I mean, you don't get to run it. I also like the lineup construction wasn't the best either. So, like, all right, let's say you bunt Dixon there, and then you've got John Collins or Roger Vergara trying to execute. I know that it's if it ain't broke, don't fix the situation. The offense was rolling, but it was clear Collins was struggling at that point, and you didn't really have a good option off the bench. So, if you bunt Dixon there, there's no guarantee that runner scores from third. So I'm fine letting Dixon. He's also a left-handed hitter. His odds of being able to execute at the least pull the ball on the ground are pretty high. It just didn't go his way. And I think you ride with your guy there. I mean, did any of y'all have a problem with that? Or I can see both sides of it. That was just my take.
Yeah. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you had Colby Wallace still hitting behind Dixon, I would have not – I didn't have a problem with it, but I would have less of a problem than I guess I maybe had if you still had Colby Wallace hitting behind Dixon. I think with, Collins – didn't really have a great regional weekend. Vergara is not a bat that you've had to trust a whole lot. And, at that point in the game, 1 run felt like it might be enough to win it, and it was. So I was surprised that we didn't bunt, but at the same time, do you really want to take the bat out of Dixon Williams' hands? He's your offense. I just didn't think they were going to give him a whole lot to hit in that spot anyway. So, maybe you do bunt him over. But, yeah, I just did, like you said, the guys hit behind him. It's hard to trust Roger Vergara in that spot to, also drive in a run if Dixon doesn't get a hit.
Johnny Robertson says the negative of the weekend for me was 3 players combining to go 1 of 17 from the 4-hole with 10 Ks. So the 4-hole was obviously behind Dixon. So that was part of the thinking too, I'm sure. Wags, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I agree with both of you and Johnny. And to me, it's, when you look at John Collins, he was coming off of a good week in Clearwater. And, that was good. And I understand, the first couple of games of the regional, you're going to ride with the lineup that kind of got you there. But it's one of the problems that I think we've talked about throughout the season. It's the lineup construction. And to me, when you have a guy that's clearly not seeing anything well, like John Collins was not this weekend, then you can't keep having him in the most prime run-producing spot in the batting order. So by Sunday night, I probably would have had Austin Irby up in that spot, hitting 4 or 3, and then move stuff around. Just try something different, maybe. Riley up to the 2-hole, and I know Sunday Riley wasn't feeling 100% either, but maybe you go Riley up to the 2-hole. You have Jack Herring hitting 4th behind Dixon, and then Colby, and then Irby, or something like that. But to me, that was another frustrating thing for me. It's the lineup construction, but at the same time, again, Roger Vergara is the only other option off the bench, really. Davin Whitaker, maybe, just for the DH spot as a whole. So I'm okay with riding Collins in the DH spot, but yeah, it's just you can't. To me, I don't think you can keep putting him in the cleanup spot when it's clearly not working. He hasn't really been seeing anything, so I was definitely frustrated by that as well.
A lot of comments about the shift. Seatown Pirate 1 says we got burned by the shift a lot and didn't see many outs from the shift. Okay with the shift at times, but we shift regardless of how we pitch the guy. I think some of this does maybe go back to your lack of range or your infield defense up the middle. I don't know if they're overcompensating with the shift to try to limit that, but it just feels, and I get it, people complain about the shift when it doesn't work and they don't really mention it when it does work, but I feel like maybe 2 times they hit it right into a guy who was in a pretty dramatic shift. And the rest of the time, it was a flare here, chopper here, chopper there against the shift. And that was, a massive part of Coastal's success on Saturday. And, you give them credit for hitting the ball. But it's not like ECU was walking a lot of guys. They were just finding holes. And I don't know, man. It's just – I don't know. Any thoughts about the shift? I do agree with the guy. It doesn't feel like we generally pitch to what the shift is, and maybe you're not supposed to in certain situations. But attacking a guy soft away, or even hard away, if you're shifting the pool, doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially attacking them with heater away. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm definitely a nerd when it comes to stats and matchups and that kind of stuff, but man, I hate the shift. And when I play MLB The Show, and I play a lot of that game, when I play online, I turn the shift off because I hate it and everything it stands for. But I'm also willing to acknowledge the truth that if it was working out in our favor, then we wouldn't be having a conversation at all. So I get why they do it, but it does seem like every possible way the shift could go wrong for us, it always seems to. And that's baseball, I guess. And that's ECU baseball. It just always seems to work out that way.
JPN says, does anyone else think we should have started Lance Williams instead of Jenkins Saturday, considering Lance Williams would have had more rest? We were talking pregame, and we both said, I think we both were we'd be fine with Lance or Jenkins. Those were, I feel the only real candidates. But Jenkins had just delivered on a big stage. Lance had been good at times, and it was worth mentioning that he had thrown 4 scoreless against Coastal. But I don't have a problem with going with Jenkins there. I think this is just more after seeing Lance Williams dominate Florida for a while, we now want to see him start against Coastal. But it's always easy to question this stuff. I don't know. Any thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, should have started Zayak, obviously.
Yeah,
I think it's obviously
clearly
easier now to say who you should have started, but Jenkins came off that game against Tulane where he pitched so well, and going into the year, I think all of us thought that Jenkins could end up being our best starter, and he still has the best stuff of anybody on the team, really. I just, you hope he puts it together in the moment, and you just have to trust him, and he didn't. And he's not the only pitcher in the Conway Regional that, has great stuff that just didn't put it together that weekend. You look at, what Florida's pitchers did against us. Those
Florida's
are guys
entire staff.
Those guys are all highly touted dudes, and they just didn't have it, and it just happens. It's just unfortunate that it happened when it happened, but hindsight's 20/20.
And I think too that when I look at it, and you look at Sean Jenkins and the year that he's had, like Scott said, we all thought that he was going to be kind of the guy for this pitching staff coming in, and didn't start off how we thought. And then it looked like he was more comfortable coming out of the bullpen, once we got into a groove there. So, and he didn't look all that comfortable starting. So to me, if you look at it from the standpoint of, say you go into that game and you lose, and then if you pitch Lance Williams and you end up losing that game, are you comfortable with Sean Jenkins starting a must-win game against Florida in an elimination game on Sunday? The answer is probably no. So I think maybe that was a little bit – and again, did they think that Lance Williams was going to go do what he did in that elimination game when he started? Probably not. But to me, I think it was more – maybe that played into it as well with, giving the – I know it's not a low-pressure – there's no low-pressure spot in the postseason in a regional, but – I think that game where your back's not fully against the wall, maybe that's the spot that we're a little more comfortable giving someone like Jenkins the ball.
And I thought, all the ECU started 4 games, so they had 4 starters, and I thought every guy that started looked comfortable. Like, I think Jenkins looked comfortable too. Like, he was pounding the zone, and Coastal just got some swings off. So highly encouraged by it. You start a sophomore, freshman, a freshman, a freshman. Most teams in America, if you start that in a regional, first off, you're not getting to a 4th game, maybe not even a 3rd, but, definitely impressive that all those guys handled it that way. All right. Chuck wants to know, when does the baseball portal period end? July 1st, I believe. That is correct,
right.
Wax?
Yep.
Okay, so we got a whole month. How long does it take to enter the damn portal? Do we need a month for this shit?
Well, you got to
Doesn't he go on a Kevin O'Sullivan rant
to know whether or not you also need to get in the portal.
You got to cater all those SEC teams that are still going to be playing for a couple more weeks in the mind of the people who make the rules, because we always have to cater to them.
Yes, like Florida and Texas and Vanderbilt.
Well, he
Georgia.
said teams that are going to continue to play.
Oh, that's right. My bad. My bad. All right, some more comments here. Skull Pirate says, how does UTSA get to Omaha before ECU? Sad, assuming they win. Well, they got to go win. They got to go to UCLA and win, Skull. Yeah, I've got mixed feelings on this. I don't want to see Pat Hallmark get to Omaha before ECU, but I also think it's good for the sport. It would be kind of cool to see, like, UTSA, which doesn't even have a damn stadium, make Omaha. So, I don't know.
Could lead to some stadium updates like it did for Coastal when they went in 2016.
We can only hope.
And I think, too, if you look at it from the standpoint of if UTSA makes it and you're looking ahead to next year, and this ECU team played very well this year when people doubted them. And I think maybe you look at a UTSA team that dominated the American this year, and they're not going to run back the same team next year. They're going to lose some guys. They're going to graduate some guys. But if they make it to Omaha, I think odds are they're probably going to be the favorite in the American again next year, pretty much no matter what. So maybe that plays into ECU's favor.
Is Texas Tech, is that job open? Because if they make it to Omaha, I don't think Hallmark is there next year.
That's true.
I did find it interesting that Hallmark said he was asked about their star players leaving. One of them went to Texas, I believe. And he said, we're not here if those people are still here. We're here because they left. If they want to get in the portal, we'll go for the next guy. So I thought that was a pretty cool comment. So
yeah, I like that.
Look, I'm not a big Hallmark fan, but, it's clear the guy is a hell of a coach. And they're well coached. So he knows what he's doing. All right, Casey Ramelli says, a weekend I'll never forget. So much fun. Looking forward to running it back in the spring. Yeah. So shout out Casey and his crew, Carolina Curveball. Hung out with them at their family's place in North Myrtle Beach. And we had a time. A lot of baseball. A lot of good breakfast spots Casey introduced me to in North Myrtle. And, gentlemen, I'm inviting you. This is an open invitation. Bucks on the Pond, Carolina Curveball, get together next March when ECU plays at Coastal Carolina. Are we doing this?
I will put it on my calendar tonight.
Yep. We have enough time. I will make that happen.
I like it.
All right.
I also love North Myrtle Beach. So
it is incredible. So let's do it. And even if we don't go to the games.
I like North Myrtle Beach so much that I wish they would change the name to no longer be associated with Myrtle Beach and just give it its own name.
I will say we rode up and down the road, and it's literally nothing but mini golf and your typical surf shop and like just food places is
God's country.
on
That's how
repeat.
it should
Yep.
be.
I mean, there's like 25 mini golf places in the span of 2 miles, but they all look incredible. And so like I was like, damn man, those dinosaurs are insane. I want to go putt putt there. I was like a little kid. Also a few strip clubs, but hey, it is what it is. All right. Chuck says, what does the panel think about retaining the main players for 2026? Chuck, I'll say this. We'll get more into this. I've just heard there's a lot of tampering going on with some of ECU's best players. We'll see where it falls, but this is college sports. I think ECU is going to do its best, as Cliff Godwin said, to retain the talent, and we'll see where it falls. We'll have a better understanding the next 48 hours. But I do know that some of ECU's top performers are being courted, and we'll see how it falls. I mean, I don't know anything really beyond that. I don't know. So look, it sucks, but this is college sports, guys. Like we can't have this conversation without it. It's almost like a hold your breath situation every time we talk about somebody. But whatever. I don't know. I'm not even gonna bring it up. We'll wait till the next podcast to discuss what's going on with some of the things I'm hearing. All right, we got a super chat in from our guy Noah Callum. He was the original super chatter. I know he's a multi-time super chatter. This makes 3 or 4. Noah says, what additions need to be added, made to the roster next season to have a better season / making supers or even Omaha? Thanks, guys. Again, we'll have more in-depth discussion, but I'll let y'all tackle this. Kind of we'll keep it more generic. Just like, what do y'all want to see added? And obviously the big part of this is retention as well. Scott?
I'll give you a couple spots. I think shortstop, you need to get better there. I think you need a guy who's rangy, that's like a 330, 340 hitter. I know that's a tall task to ask for, but I think having a Omaha caliber shortstop is the only way we get there. And if you look at the closest that we've been, it's been with Agnos at shortstop, and he was that. And I also think we need a left-handed bat. Not necessarily one that's a starter, but somebody that can pinch hit. I think a couple times this year we've gotten trapped to where you got John Collins up there late in the game, righties throwing, and you don't have anyone to come off the bench that's left-handed that can provide some pop. I know Vergara, but he's not like a distance guy. Like he's a guy that's going to hit the ball the other way and kind of hit it into the ground more than in the air. So I would say a lefty, doubles or power guy, and then shortstop, and then obviously always want more pitching.
Wags, any big notables come to mind?
Yeah, I think, obviously, like Scott said, you need a shortstop and you need another bat. Yeah, I think to me, one of the biggest, and obviously, there were a lot of holes on this team this year, but to me, the biggest one was that John Collins spot in the regional. It was you're missing that middle of the order bat that is going to produce runs pretty much consistently throughout a season. So I think you need to go find that guy. I don't really care what position he plays. To me, it's you need to find a bat and then you find a spot for him in the lineup. And, maybe they have that guy coming in. You have a couple of JUCO guys that I think could fit that mold. But to me, you need that consistent run producer in the middle of your lineup that's not just going to be streaky, but someone you can trust to come up in a clutch moment, whether it's the first weekend of the season against whoever you're playing or the second against Carolina or in a regional against Coastal or Florida. So to me, that's the biggest need. And then obviously, you always need more pitching. And even though some guys stepped up this weekend and had career performances and made you feel good going into the offseason, you need more depth. You can't let one weekend be the reason you don't recruit something. So you need starting depth, and by getting more starting depth, you'll eventually kind of fill the pieces in behind them in the bullpen. But I would definitely like another starter, a weekend starter, a true proven weekend starter, as close as you can get to that.
Zach Griffin adds, we definitely need another catcher we can trust so Walker Barron doesn't have to catch every game, and no doubt about that. I mean, a huge play, guys, was the wild pitch in the 8th inning of the game on Sunday, and that run doesn't score without that. And I'm not like blaming Walker for it. I'm sure he would tell you he needs to catch it, but like how much of that is just fatigue, catching every damn inning. So that is a factor as well. So definitely need to get a catcher. You know, I know Blade Carver plays catcher for his JUCO. I don't know how he projects as a D1 catcher. And they've got some catchers, I think, that they recruit him. But definitely good thoughts there. All right. Johnny Robertson says Braden Burris tied the freshman record for stolen bases with 18. Steve Godwin did the same in 1988. So Johnny stats with that. Ole Miss is down to their final out. It's been a long weekend, boys. I'm struggling.
Can't believe Duke is about to host a super regional.
Can they even host it at Crap Stadium?
And the game's over, so Duke is gonna host the super regional because I zero chance they send it to Murray State.
Could you imagine Murray State hosting Duke?
They should. I would assume that Murray State has bathrooms for people to use that aren't also the bathrooms for the players. So
what a freaking cakewalk to Omaha for the Blue Devils. By the way, they don't even need Gracia.
Yeah.
So let's not start about that BS.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten into O'Sullivan yet.
And while we're talking about Supers, Little Rock is taking a 3-1 lead over LSU early in their game 7.
SEC.
Go Little Rock. And that's what LSU gets for trying to poach some ECU players. All right, let's try to find something else here.
Can we talk some crap? I think it's time.
Is it time to do O'Sullivan?
I'm ready to rag on Kevin.
All right. God. Kevin O'Sullivan. Look, I mean, you guys can take the floor here. I addressed it on my show earlier today, so I'll let y'all get at it here. We'll start Wags. He's ready. He's fired up.
Yeah, so I want to start. I understand being a little frustrated that your games get moved back to
Now that is epic.
That's amazing. We need a screenshot of that. But
I am taking a screenshot as we speak. Keep holding it up.
But
if you're listening to our podcast, Scott Lorbacher has a whiteboard that says Quab. Sully, shove this up your ass. 11-6, 11-4.
Well done. I never loved Scott more than I love him right now.
You should thank Igo's kids for making us late to our podcast. That allowed me the opportunity to find this whiteboard that I did not know where it was, but it was somewhere upstairs.
That's an incredible whiteboard, by the way.
That's awesome.
And I'm posting this picture right now. But continue, actually.
But so to me, I understand O'Sullivan being a little frustrated that, 2 games got pushed back a little bit because the night before ran late, and it doesn't directly benefit him and it does directly benefit the opponent. But in this case, it's a damn hour. It's 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock. It's not like we're pushing it back from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Like it really doesn't make that big of a difference. And then, we have a coach here at ECU, Cliff Godwin, who is fiery. He likes to, go argue with umpires, and, he's a little rough around the edges sometimes. And, but he does it in a way to where you don't come out of it thinking, man, he's a terrible human being. But Kevin O'Sullivan, the way he treated not only Coastal Carolina staff, NCAA staff, ECU players, and, Parker Bird, I mean, what he said to Parker Bird, and if you haven't heard, Parker Bird came clean on Pirate Radio today, and he said that Kevin O'Sullivan told him to shove that whiteboard up his ass, and a few more words in between there too.
And he was cussing out Gabe Beschloss of all people. Like, come on, man.
If Gabe Beschloss, no disrespect to Gabe Beschloss, but if he's in your head, you've already lost the game. But again, it's, to me, there's a difference in defending your team and trying to fire up your team between what he did. And to me, it was you were off the field early, the first angle of the video we saw, and he's going after the field supervisors, the regional supervisors, and it carried over to the first base dugout. And he's just going at it, and you could hear the words in the videos too. But it's, I mean, it's embarrassing. It's a terrible look, and I mean, O'Sullivan is an asshat. And I don't care how frustrated you get. To me, it's about how you treat people. And that's supposed to be a guy who's leading college students and trying to mold them into, men, baseball players. But he just set a piss poor example. But that's no surprise because he's a terrible human being. He always has been. And, I hope that his half assed apology that he put out today is not the last we're going to hear of this, because putting out an apology for what you've been publicly called out on at the time is not enough. I think you need to apologize to the players directly. Own up to what you did. Don't apologize because you got caught and a video got posted. Apologize because you mean it and you truly regret it. But Kevin O'Sullivan, I hate you, and I will always hate you. And that's all I gotta say.
Jonathan Wagner comes from the top rope. Look, yeah, I'm not buying the apology at all. I'll let Scott give his piece on this in a second. And I do know that the NCAA, as we sit here on 9:59, Monday, June 2nd, is meeting tonight, and on the agenda, the Kevin O'Sullivan situation will come up for the baseball committee, and it will be addressed. I wouldn't be shocked if there's some sort of announcement tomorrow morning about his status. I don't know if he could get suspended. This is really like uncharted territory. This you just don't see coaches just dropping F-bombs left and right and telling players to shove whiteboards up their asses. So, they they got to meet on this stuff and decide what to do. But yeah, they're meeting on it. So, Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it just speaks to a larger issue, which is the SEC is grown into be the whiniest bitches on the internet, and it's a shame because I remember when the college football playoff was looking at expansion, the SEC pushed a 5-team uh, automatic qualifiers just to the highest conference champions, right? And I was like, that's a big moment because it shows that, hey, we should reward teams for success and not reward you because of who you're associated with. And it's gone from that, which was probably 10 years ago, to today, where it just seems like the power conference leagues just expect things to be handed to them in a way that's just a real shame. And like, they don't want to compete anymore. They want to buy talent and then play against other programs that buy talent. And they don't want to compete with actual programs that take guys in and develop them, because those are the programs that kick their ass. You look at UTSA and what they've done to Texas this year, and you look at what ECU did to Florida, Murray State, what they did to Ole Miss. Those aren't programs where they're buying players off of the market. They're programs where they take players that have talent and develop them into better players. And I used to have a lot of respect for the SEC because they were a league that would compete and they would play against other good programs. But now they've hunkered down and they've barricaded themselves in to this circle jerk of just we're better than everybody else and we don't have to play anybody else because the league that we play in is so good. And it's like, well, you haven't proven that by only playing yourself. And I do think it's a real shame that the national college baseball media has not held Kevin Sullivan's feet to the fire for his actions this weekend, nor have they really came out and talked about how maybe we have overrated the SEC this season. And, I will concede the fact that the most talented players and the most talented teams are in the SEC. I think that the players on those teams will far and away have, on average, a longer career in professional baseball and Major League Baseball than a lot of the teams that they're getting eliminated by. But the better teams are elsewhere. And it's because it takes a long time for a team to gel. And when you're only gelling because you're getting paid the most money, I think it's just not good for baseball teams. and Kevin Sullivan just cried for 12 straight hours when he got. I mean, granted, I'd probably be mad if somebody woke me up at 1:32, but he just cried the whole day. And you had time to prepare your team to win a baseball game, and I think they thought they were going to cakewalk ECU that first game, and they wanted more time to prepare for Coastal in the second game. But guess what? You got your ass kicked for the second time, and as far as I'm concerned, I'd be happy to never play Florida again because he represents that school and their fans and have circled the wagons around him in a way that I think is pretty embarrassing for them. They should be embarrassed by.
Yeah, I mean, there's some Florida fans, and look, there's a lot of good Florida fans that came over to hoist the colors that I enjoyed the interactions with. But there's like some fans defending Kevin O'Sullivan, saying like he was in the right here. Like, I can understand, like Wag said, their game, they played the early game and like it got pushed back. So like it is somewhat of an advantage for the team they're playing. Although I wouldn't really call it an advantage. I'd call it more like just like these things typically happen, and Florida just happened to be on the end of having to wait a little bit longer. But we're talking about 1 hour, man. 1 freaking hour. And ECU did not find out until after 1 a.m., well after 1 a.m. as well. So, I mean, it had no impact on the game. So, like, to just blow up like that, to treat people like that. I do want to give props to a couple people. Brian Bailey did a phenomenal job in reporting it, and also the post-game press conference, got on Kevin O'Sullivan. He's like, "You handle that?" I thought that was pretty good. Following up on it. And I tried to ask, about the words being exchanged. He just kind of blew me off and talked about how good ECU was. So, that was interesting. But I also want to give Kevin Schnall, the Coastal Carolina coach, a lot of credit as well. For his team just won a regional championship, and like to go out of his way to really speak passionately. Nobody asked the question. He brought it up on his own at the end of the press conference to kind of wrap up the weekend. To go out of his way to make it known, I thought was pretty awesome. He earned my respect. Kevin O'Sullivan lost all of my respect. Kevin Schnall earned a lot of my respect. So I just want to give a shout out to those two guys. And if anybody knows Mark Scaff, former UNCW coach, like super nice, genuine dude. To be berating him like that is just garbage. So Kevin O'Sullivan got what he deserved. Karma is a bitch, and the Pirates whooped that ass and shoved it up the ass. There it is. Ray Scott says Sully would have cried either way. He was mad because he thought he needed more time to get ready for Coastal Carolina game 2. Best part of the weekend for me was handing Florida 2 losses. I mean, not to take anything away from Coastal because they probably would have won the regional anyways. I thought they were a much better team. I even watched Florida live versus Fairfield, and I'm like, look, this Florida team is really good, really talented, but like they're not that good. And so like when ECU played them again, I was originally worried until really watching them versus Fairfield. I'm like, if you just make quality pitches, these guys get themselves out. In the mound, the stuff is loud, but they're very inconsistent. But how much did it help Coastal? Wags not even having to play Florida. Like they literally, I mean, they just had to beat Fairfield and ECU twice, which is easier said than done. But when they got that draw, I think they were pretty pissed, but it ended up working out pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, last week, I said that, Florida's got to be feeling pretty good about that draw. And it wasn't because I thought Coastal was a bad team, but when you look at some of the other hosts, I think, they might match up better. And, Florida's really hurt. And they are injured. They're missing some key guys, and I think that played a role. But I'm not looking forward to all of this offseason until next college baseball season. That's going to be the excuse. Man, if we were healthy and we played that game 1 hour earlier, we would have beat the crap out of you. No, shut the hell up. So you have that. But, yeah, Coastal is really good. Like you said, I think they are capable. I think they're going to win the Super. And I think that's a team that's capable of competing for a national championship this season. And credit to Kevin Schnall. He also earned my respect. But yeah, I mean, it would have been kind of funny, though, if after that whole O'Sullivan fiasco, if those two got to go head on in that night game. I'm glad that ECU was there, don't get me wrong. But, man, it would have been pretty funny to see how spicy that game would have gotten if O'Sullivan and Schnall were having handshake lines. post game instead of Cliff and Schnall, and I would have paid money to see what would happen there.
Agree 100%. All right. I feel like we haven't really talked about Austin Irby's weekend. I feel like we got to do that. And we can spend more on Ethan Norby, just his performance, like because it's kind of forgotten about by the time Sunday rolls around. I know Scott addressed it a little bit, but I just thought those two guys. I know they made the all tournament team. Braden Burris made the all tournament team. I didn't think Braden had his best weekend, but still had some huge moments as well, and great experience for a freshman. But Irby guys like almost Bryson Worrell esque, just like massive hit after massive hit, and seeing him play with that swagger, Scott, like that, it was just I mean, what can you say other than it was just pretty incredible?
Yeah, I mean, Irby the last 2 weeks has been just unconscionable. I mean, it's been great. It's 2 inches away from a home run on one of his doubles too. So I mean, it was just an awesome weekend. And I sat next to his mom for the Memphis game, and I can tell you where he gets his like competitiveness from. But like the Irbies are awesome, and it goes to show where why you take that talented of a freshman. And we've gone through some growing pains with freshmen this year, but those guys balled out over the last 2 weeks, and we wouldn't be in that position without the freshmen. And Irby is certainly a key piece of that. And you look at the first baseman we've had over the years at ECU, the Kyle Rollers, the Bryant Packers, the Spencer Brickhouses, like just guys that could pound the ball onto the practice field. And Irby's the next in line in that. And I'm really looking forward to seeing him in an East Carolina uniform for at least 2 more years. But and Braden Burris too. I think you have your right side of your infield set for a while if you can hold on to those two guys.
Stay away, SEC. Wags, any individual performances or final thoughts on the regional we haven't brought up yet?
Yeah, I mean, first I want to touch on Irby just because I predicted him to lead this team in home runs this year as a freshman, and while he didn't do that, it's something that I've gone back to for the past few weeks. You learn the most about players, especially young players, when it's their life on the line. And this team has been playing at baseball for 2 weeks now. And when Austin Irby knew that it was win or go home and it was do or die, he stepped up and he lived up to the moment. On a team that I think is lacking a vocal leader like we've had in the past, I think he kind of emerged into that role. And he let his play do the talking, but yeah, like he plays, like Scott said, he plays with some swagger, and it's contagious. So that was really encouraging. And yeah, I think he's moved himself into not that I think he was out of this tier earlier, but I think he's moved into a tier of absolute must keep for next season. And if you lose him, then you've got a lot of stuff to figure out. But other individuals, I think he's not going to get talked about enough. We talked about him earlier, but Alex Peltier, he had a great week in Clearwater, I think. And defensively at the plate, his bat looked like it matured a lot over the last 2 weeks. But, Peltier, his bat, he still has a lot of swing and miss. And he's far from perfect. But if you go into next year with him as your center fielder, I think you're probably feeling okay. And he's going to be an elite defensive center fielder. You know that for sure. And if the bat can just take a step like it did, I think, this weekend, then you're feeling pretty good about a 7, 8, 9 hole type hitter. He's not a guy that I would say you absolutely cannot, recruit over. I think if you find an upgrade, then you find an upgrade. And again, you figure it out. But even if he settles into that role where next year he's a defensive replacement and late innings and he comes in and his bat's in the lineup, I have more confidence that that's not just a complete, black hole like maybe I would have about a month ago. So Peltier's stock is definitely on the rise. And again, I've liked him all year long. I think he projects as a very good baseball player at this level. he just looks like one of those prototypical ECU studs. So I hope he figures it out next year. I hope this is just a launching pad, but he deserves some praise as well.
Yeah, he started the year incredible, had a massive dip, and I think he just lost confidence. And look, there are some things he needs to clean up with his swing, but he can go get it. He's got a really strong arm. I just think he needs to fill out. If he can add like 10, 15 pounds, I think he's got some power too that will play with his swing. And then, swing decisions, that sort of stuff over time. He's a guy that I think can make a huge leap year 1 to year 2. All right, a couple comments here. And I do, too, want to give a shout-out to Jack Herring. Jack Herring had a phenomenal weekend, man. Like, dude is I didn't think he could be anything more than a fourth outfielder based on what I saw in the fall, and he has proved me dead wrong. So Jack Herring has been awesome, man. He puts up tough at-bats every time. All right, we got some comments. Brandon Carr says, great show again, fellas. Scott, is that Shamu on your shirt?
This is the logo for my daughter's swim team, and she maybe had the best performance of the weekend on Sunday, dropping 38 seconds off of her breaststroke time from last year to this year.
That's big time. We had Slater's first swim lesson today, and he cried the whole time, so that was great.
That was also our experience at our first swim.
Okay. So there's hope, you're telling me.
There is hope.
All right. Wag says, Brandon Carter continues to comment, now we know why you hate O'Sullivan. Or now we know you hate O'Sullivan. Stop hating on our heels, he says here, and let the audience know we win it all this year.
Yeah, all I will say there is I do think that North Carolina team is very good, and I think that they are very capable of winning a national championship this year.
Who are they getting in their super?
They are getting – who are they getting? Arizona?
They're the 5, right?
Yeah, 5. I think it is Arizona. I think you're right.
Pretty sure it's Arizona.
Yeah. Sounds
By
right.
the way, Zachary Agnos picks up career save number 4, and the Rockies have their 10th win of the season. They are now 10-50. We are 35 minutes away from collecting a moment of silence for the Rockies in honor at 10:50 p.m. of their season.
They are also 4-0 after 8-game losing streaks. So
wow,
something to know.
I was trying to see if Agnos faced Norby because they beat the Miami Marlins, so he did not face Norby. Norby went 0 for 4. He went through Jesus Sanchez, Augustine Ramirez, and he got Kyle Stowers to ground into a game-ending double play. So shout out Zach Agnos as he continues. He did give a bomb to Juan Soto, but, who doesn't? The other day. Johnny Robertson has the Pirates had never beaten Florida in any men's sport, 0-8 until this weekend, and good to see that. Kendra Presley says, I was glad to see us go out playing our brand of baseball. If Saturday night would have been our last game, it would have been super defeating, but Sunday we played both games with heart and as a team. Thank you, Kevin O'Sullivan, for the extra motivation. Zach Griffin says, I bet Kevin O'Sullivan reaches out to Irby since he rakes against them. And then he adds, then I hope Irby tells him to shove it. Yeah, if any ECU players transfers to Florida after this weekend, I will lose all respect for them.
It's worse than AMAC.
It would be 100 times worse than AMAC. So don't do it. If you do it, I'm done. With this podcast, with covering baseball, covering college sports, I'm hanging it up.
Wow.
Done. So don't.
Respect.
I'll have to go on a Kevin Schnall rant about the player who leaves ECU for Florida. Skull Pirate, speaking of poaching, says, does ECU try to poach players from the Murray States? Is he asking, from Murray State or, the Murray States of college baseball?
That caliber of team, probably.
Yeah. I just don't look – I think ECU – and maybe you work some backroom deals if you know a guy, but, I don't think Cliff Godwin is about that life. I think once a guy enters the portal, it's fair game, but, do we really think Cliff is going to, back channel an agent to get to Murray State shortstop.
I still think those types of guys, if at that level, if they're good enough to transfer up to a better conference, then they're probably just going to go to one of the better conferences. And, for the most part, not all of them are that good, but I think a general idea is probably that's safe to do. But yeah, I think there are guys that you should go after, but at the same time, I think and we've talked about this before and we'll talk about it next week, but I think I'd just rather take shots on JUCO guys. And, go get some guys. If you have guys from that level, like a Murray State level that is interested and you can get them there, you do it. But I also don't think it's the end all be all.
All right, a couple more things before we close. Bold predictions from last week, guys. How'd y'all do?
We both got our pitching one wrong because we had Jenkins going pretty deep into the game. You got yours right because Norby did have 10 Ks versus Florida.
I don't like that smirk on your face as Scott read that.
That did not happen. I had Dixon 4 extra base hits. I think he had 1. I had 2 home run weekend for Colby Wallace. I would put Colby Wallace in the had a less than stellar weekend overall.
So we had the multiple. So we did a position and hitter.
We did both.
Yeah. Okay.
I completely forgot about that, to be honest.
I did too. But Ethan Norby, 10 Ks. Ring it up, baby. Cash it.
You're on a roll.
I was the only one who had us predicted to be in the regional final, but the path was different.
I had us beating Florida and then losing 2 in a row, which, we all thought ECU was going to get absolutely cooked by Florida going into this Sunday game.
Our group chat at about 11 a.m. on Sunday morning was probably about as negative as Kevin O'Sullivan was to the ECU.
Kevin O'Sullivan saved ECU from going 1-2. So I want to personally thank him. The other thing I want to do, guys, is we got to give Riley Johnson and Jake Hunter their final due diligence. We can't go the whole podcast without just shouting out those guys. Just phenomenal careers, man, and what more can we say that hasn't already been said? We could do a whole podcast on their sacrifices for the program, but anytime there are seniors who stay, overcome adversity, do everything they can to wear the purple and gold proudly and do everything they can to lead ECU to wins. It's emotional. It's emotional to cover. As fans, it's emotional. And I know it was emotional for those guys. But I thought Riley and Jake both handled themselves incredible in the post-game interview. Riley was obviously torn up especially. And I just thought he pulled it together and gave some awesome quotes. And Jake was Jake. He had some levity to his comments, but also you could tell he was pretty emotional as well. So just final thoughts on those two gentlemen. We'll start with Wags.
Yeah. I talked about Jake Hunter earlier, but it's awesome what he did and that he was able to go out, like I said earlier, with a good individual performance like that and in his personal career at a high note, even though the team didn't win. But yeah, that's a guy that it goes beyond baseball too. Just what he did, what he went through to get here this year is awesome. It speaks for itself. But that's also one of those guys, in the dugout, in between innings, when you play a song and he's out there going crazy, dancing, you're going to miss a guy like that. The culture guy, locker room guy, everyone loves him. So he had a big impact. And then Riley, obviously, I think it was fitting that Sunday went how it did for Riley. And the fact that he wasn't in the lineup for the final game against Coastal until last minute, he got cleared. He said he's good to go, and they made a last-minute addition and put him in. So I think that just kind of epitomizes what Riley Johnson has been through the last 2 years, and that is a warrior. He has literally given everything he has physically, emotionally to this program. I have a lot of respect for him. He's one of those guys you're going to see around forever. Like guys like Jacob Starling at the regional this weekend. That's going to be Riley Johnson and Jake Hunter. You're going to see those guys a lot in the future. And again, when we talk about, when building rosters, your prototypical ECU player, and that might not be who it is, but when you're looking at trying to fill out your roster for next year, I want to find there is no next Riley Johnson. There is no other Jake Hunter. Those two guys are them, and there's nobody that can replace them. But those are the types of players and the types of dedication that I want on my baseball team. So credit to them. And they're both massive losses. I think if you look at this offseason, pure numbers, it's probably not as substantial looking what you lose from this year's team to next year compared to last year to this year. But what you lose are those two guys, leadership-wise and just grit and determination. It's massive. We're going to miss them next year, and I wish them both nothing but the best moving forward with whatever's next.
Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say it was really impressive, the composure that they had in the post-game press conference, coming off what will be their last game at East Carolina. Two guys that just really gave everything they had to ECU, and I'll always respect that just a ton, especially in this age where guys don't stick around. And for Jake Hunter to now I guess Mustache March is back up for grabs. He had held it down for like 4 years, but it really was awesome to see him get one last outing and have that success after a couple rocky ones right before that. That was really cool. And Riley Johnson just all weekend was old Riley Johnson. That play at first where he was out, but he's like flipping over first base. It's just that's what I'll think of when I think of him. And even beyond that, the Ethan Youngs and Dixon Williams, who we've probably seen in the ECU uniform for the last time, just two guys. Ethan Young's the guy that came in here as a JUCO guy and really bought into what this place is all about. And then Dixon Williams, a local guy who, went from freshman phenom to really the face of the team going into this year. So just it's hard when it ends, and it's going to be sad and it'll feel different next year when you don't see those names in the lineup. And when we do our preseason prediction show, we won't have Riley Johnson to lead the team in stolen bases, and we'll have Dixon Williams there to lead the team in offense, and it'll feel different without him. And just an incredible group of guys all around. Even some of the ones that may not stick around and enter the portal and finish their careers elsewhere. This team came together in the very end and fought all the way through and gave it everything they had, and I'll always respect that.
Yeah, I mean, look, covering this team is still feels, even with the portal era, it still feels different than covering like football and basketball. You just feel like you're so. I think it's the amount of games, but also just the people involved with the program. You feel like even as fans and definitely as a media member, like you get so attached to these guys. It's always the hardest at the end of the year for baseball, like seeing the press conference. But it also speaks to like what Cliff Godwin and his staff have created, like the culture, the family. It's just special, man. Like and these guys will be back next year or the years to come, like in random games. Like I saw Jake Washer, Barini, Starlin. I was just texting Star earlier, getting him on my show this week. So like these guys, they come and they go as players, but they like are always a part of the ECU baseball legacy, which is just like it makes it special to cover, man. It really does. So that's the thing I enjoy most about this. All right, before we wrap up, Cameron has a comment. He says, if UTSA, Coastal, and Duke make it to Omaha, it'll be tough to handle and will lead people to ask some questions. I can already see the burners loading up their tweets about Godwin now. Respectfully, the burners can shove it up their ass, Cameron. I don't care. I don't care what the burners think. And Cameron, this comment makes you think you're running one of the burners. First off, like Coastal, they've already won a national championship, is whatever. I still would not trade these teams. They can all make it in Omaha. They can meet in the national championship for all I care. I would not trade what ECU has for any of those teams. Duke, crappy facility, no baseball fans. UTSA plays in a parking lot, no baseball fans. Coastal, all right, their stadium's pretty sweet and they've won a national championship, but still, I wouldn't trade that ugly ass teal for purple and gold, baby. So I don't really care, Cameron. Get the comment out of here. That's how I feel. That's all I've got to say, as Kevin Schnall would put it.
What a way to end.
I mean, would you guys?
Amen.
I'll be annoyed if Duke makes it.
I will be.
Everybody
as
else I
well.
don't really care about. I mean, UTSA is like I've never met a UTSA fan. I assume they exist, but yeah, I mean they're so far away that I don't care. And Coastal's earned it. I'll give them the credit. They deserve every bit of the success they've had. They bought into their program. Their fans show up and show out in a really cool way, and they're in a state where Clemson and South Carolina are never going to give them the credit that they deserve. And they've been the premier baseball program in that state since probably 2016, I guess, when they won the national championship. Really, before that, South Carolina was obviously really good, but Coastal has been the shining star in South Carolina for a while as far as baseball. So, all credit to them that they've done it the right way. And then, you know what? If Duke makes it to Omaha, maybe that just means Pollard gets a different job and we don't have to deal with his whining ass anymore either.
Do we think if Duke makes it that Cliff Godwin will send a congratulatory text to Chris Pollard?
I would say no.
I do think it's funny that Duke uses a hard hat as their celebration prop because if there's anything that no one associates with Duke is a blue-collar workmanship. Are we serious?
I did laugh at that earlier.
I just assumed it was a hard hat because their stadium is always under construction. And you might have something fall on your head if you walk near.
That's probably why they wear it, to be quite honest. Cameron says, how is Duke allowed to host the Super, but they couldn't host a regional last year? Because they don't want Murray State to host it.
I bet they don't host it at their home park.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where they're going to host it.
They can go USA Baseball and Cary. It's got like 2,000 seats. They're not going to need that many. They could go DBAP if it's available. But.
And I'll say this too, Coastal obviously has been consistently good, but this is their first super regional since 2016 when they won the championship. So it's not like they've been – like ECU has still been the best program of these four teams. Duke is definitely close, probably the closest, but I still say like since 2016 – ECU, since Cliff Godwin has gotten there, ECU has been the best of those four. So, like, just because those teams are making it this year does not mean they have a better program. Do they have a better team this year? Absolutely. But I did want to make that. Like, it's just because ECU hasn't been to Omaha we're having this conversation. That's, I mean, and I get it. I do. That is the golden goose, but it's not always that cut and dry. So, anyways, it's late, boys. It's time to wrap up. We'll have another show next Monday night, 9 p.m., to react to what's going on with the portal. We'll look more into the offseason and what additions, what the subtractions mean, all that good stuff. So, JPN says the Bulls are on the road this weekend, so maybe they host it at DBAP. So, all right, let's get out of here. Wags, appreciate you. Scott, appreciate you. And shout out as well to Noah Callum for the super chat, and shout out to all the whiteboards all across the country for doing your job and not going up people's asses. And shout out to Scott's whiteboard. If you're listening to our podcast, tune in to the YouTube. You can see it live. It's glorious. We're out of here on a Monday. We'll see you next week.